Hello, and welcome back to Pathfinder. My name is Philip, and I'm here to talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is part of a series I am producing covering the various deities in the Pathfinder role-playing game, and its setting, the world of Golarion. Last time, I covered Milani, the community-minded minor goddess of hope and revolutions. This time, I will be continuing my exploration of the minor deities of Golarion with Ashava, the Empyreal Lord of Dancers, Moonlight, and Lost Souls. Before that, though, if you are enjoying this video and want to hear more Pathfinder lore, consider subscribing or commenting below. With that out of the way, let's move on to the rundown. Ashava, often referred to as the True Spark, is the benevolent Imperial Lord of Dance and the Night. She serves as a guide for the lost, from lost mortals in the wild places of the world to lost souls unable to find their final rest. Her faith is small, as befits an Imperial Lord, but her followers are often well-liked and are generally welcomed in the communities where they appear. Her areas of concern are moonlit nights, lost souls, and self-expression, specifically through dance. Outside of her dedicated clergy, she is most commonly worshipped by dancers and people of Varisian descent. Before I go any further, I should probably explain what an Imperial Lord is. In the world of Pathfinder, there are 3 broad classifications of beings which can grant divine power to mortal followers. Well, okay, maybe 4, depending on how you count Razmir, but I'll ignore that until the next video. The 3 classifications are, in my words, the true gods, the demigods, and the mythic mortals. True gods are what you think of when I say the word gods. Sarenrae, Asmodeus, Pharasma, all fully divine beings whose power is so great that it can't be comprehended by mortals. While individual gods might be stronger or weaker than their fellows, think Milani versus Asmodeus, they all have one piece of meta-knowledge which defines them as gods. They have never been officially statted by Paizo in their current incarnation. In short, true gods cannot be mechanically killed by players. They have no stats. If a GM wants their players to kill a true god, they have to make up a way for that to happen. On the other end of the spectrum are the mythic mortals, typically the weakest and least well-known of the 3 classifications. The mythic rules in 1st edition allowed mortal PCs to attain a sliver of their own divinity by taking one of several mythic path options, allowing them to grant divine spellcasting to a select group of followers. Their churches were not well established on Golarion, since the first time these options were available to players was in the relatively recent Wrath of the Righteous adventure path. As mortal PCs, these characters were firmly statted and could easily be mechanically killed. Well, okay, not easily. 1st edition mythic rules were busted as all hell. Anyway, in between these 2 classifications were the demigods, beings which could grant divine spellcasting, had specific deific obediences players could perform, and generally had established churches on Golarion, or at least cults. These demigods were typically statted and could, in theory, be killed by players. They were typically very strong, CR 25 or higher, intended for parties of mythic PCs or at least level 20 or higher PCs. Nocticula, who I covered a few videos ago, began her existence as a demigod prior to her ascension. Among the demigods, there were many sub-classifications, typically based on alignment or native plane. These ranged from demon lords, to archdevils, to psychopomp ushers, and many, many more. The Imperial Lords are one of these classifications. Imperial Lord is an umbrella term for the benevolent servants of the good-aligned deities, and the term includes ascendant members of the Angels, Archons, Azadas, and Agathions. Ashava is one of these demigods, and specifically is an Azada Imperial Lord, native to Elysium. One final point of clarification, Paizo will occasionally throw out the term demigod to describe lesser true gods. Many of the gods of the dwarven pantheon, such as Thrud or Bolka, have previously been referred to as demigods, even though they are what I would describe as true gods. When I use the phrase demigod, I am specifically referring to previously statted pseudo-deities who can function as gods for clerics or champions, but whose strength is at least measurable within the mechanics of the game. Or at least the mechanics of 1st edition. Okay, with all that context, back to the main topic. Ashava typically presents herself to mortals as a beautiful woman with long, dark hair crowned in a wreath of moss or leaves. She is garbed in a flowing gown or robe made from starlight. She typically presents herself partially obscured in shadow, unless the observer is bathed in the light of the full moon. She is often described as having an internal glow, so she can be picked out even in total darkness. On Elysium, she eschews her human form and instead presents herself as a glowing ball of light, floating in a capricious and meandering way. Due to her prominence among the Varisian peoples of Galarian, followers typically depict her as of Varisian ethnicity, with their characteristically expressive eyes and olive skin. Art commonly depicts her in the act of dancing, which is consistent with the way she presents herself in visions. She is also commonly shown with flushed cheeks, indicating that she has been dancing for some time. Ashava makes her home in Elysium, at the base of the Mountain of Lingering Soul Song, the central peak of the plain. The mountain is known to reverberate with a mysterious song audible to all those who approach. Ashava's realm, called the Sparkling Fens, rests at the base of the mountain, in a place where the song is easy to hear. The realm itself takes the form of a swamp, though without the unpleasantness often found in the many swamps of the inner sphere. The place smells of vanilla and plums, and is bathed in perpetual moonlight. Visitors can find their way through this realm by following the benevolent floating lights which guide them along. Devout followers of Ashava, called Ashavans, are called to be true to themselves, expressing themselves through the art of dance. They are commonly called to aid those who are lost, and thus tend to venture out into the wild places of the world. They might instead choose to help those who are spiritually or emotionally lost, and might therefore take up positions in communities which allow them to keep on the lookout for those in need of help. Followers are also called to aid in laying the dead to rest, typically through the use of kindness and diplomacy, rather than force. As such, they might work alongside morticians and those who tend graveyards. Ashavans will sometimes be seen as reclusive by others, though they are typically friendly and helpful by nature, allowing them to overcome many of the prejudices they might face. Ashavans are typically night owls, and consider the night a time of expression and faithfulness. Formal temples to Ashava are practically unheard of. This is due in part to the tendency of her followers to wander into the wild in isolation or in small groups in search of lost souls in need of help. Another factor is the tendency of the faithful to seek out a clear view of the night sky for worship. They typically congregate in forest clearings or in dark town squares where they can bask in the light of the moon. Services to Ashava always occur at night and are focused around dance, with church leaders typically being the first to begin dancing. Followers are encouraged to dance to their own steps rather than in coordination, so the proceedings can appear quite chaotic to outside observers. On occasion, followers might spontaneously and coincidentally fall into step with one another, and this is often taken as a sign of Ashava's favor. On the rare occasion where 2 full moons appear in a given calendar month, the second appearance is considered an especially sacred holiday, and is called the Terpsichoread. Shrines to Ashava are more common than temples, and consist of simple tables or altars where a follower has a view of the night sky. Shrines are commonly found in dance studios and in cemeteries or graveyards. Ashava's holy text is the Dance Nocturnal, a small book whose cover appears unmarked unless read by the light of the moon. The text is broken into 2 parts, with the first half describing the events of Ashava's history and her specific views and teachings. The second half of the text is a dance manual, filled with sheet music and artful illustrations of Ashava walking through the steps of specific dances. These steps are considered instructional, not binding, and followers are specifically taught to adapt and improvise as their heart instructs. There's even a saying among Ashavans which professes this: "The steps are guides, not fetters." Different copies of the dance nocturnal contain a wide variety of dances and music, from flowing Varisian folk dances to more formal Taldan waltzes to the jigs popular among halflings. Common among nearly all copies are the flowing nature of the calligraphy and the instructional drawings. Ashava's church is small due to her status as an Empyreal Lord as opposed to a full deity. Her areas of focus are relatively small compared to true gods, so her faith is fairly narrow. Like many of her fellow demigods, however, those mortals who do revere her above all others are exceptionally devout and feel a strong personal connection to her faith. Her faith is strongest in Varisia, especially along the Lost Coast, stretching from Magnamar up to Riddleport. Magnamar itself is a religious center for followers of many Empyreal Lords, and Ashava is no exception. The true spark is especially treasured by the native Varisian people, and they make up a huge portion of her faithful. As a result of their nomadic lifestyle, her faith has spread across Avistan to wherever ethnic Varisians can be found, from shadowy Nidal to as far away as Ustalav, the River Kingdoms, and Mendev. Her faith will be small in these regions, and likely centered among Varisian caravaneers, but it still has some presence. Ashava also has a following among dancers. While many artists typically revere Shellen above all others, dancers specifically might instead choose to revere Ashava, or at least to recite a prayer in her name before an especially important performance. This might include dancers as far away as the halls of Cheliax or Absalom. Ashava also has some prominence among those who have recently lost a loved one, or who believe that a deceased friend or relative might be lingering on as an undead. These followers might offer prayers to Ashava that she might guide the lost souls in question back to the River of Souls, so they might be judged by Pharasma and reach their final rest. For similar reasons, some ghosts revere her as they seek to settle their business in the inner sphere and move on to the afterlife. Finally, Ashava has a notable following of non-evil lycanthropes. These individuals, typically werebears and werewolves, revere her as a goddess of moonlight. They might also feel a connection to her for her interest in self-expression and her teaching to be true to yourself, no matter what society says. Many of her lycanthrope followers have streaks of silver-white fur on their bodies, reminiscent of moonlight. Not much has been published about Ashava's personal history. Her origins are vague at best, though ancient legends claim that the wandering lights of Elysium, which seem to have existed for as long as the plane itself, coalesced on a moonlit night many thousands of years ago. These collective lights became Ashava, who immediately began to dance, to a song only she could hear. On Golarion, as in the real world, many cultures have stories about wandering lights in the wilderness, especially in and around swamps or marshes. Many of these stories on Golarion are actually tales of will-o-wisps, malevolent aberrations who lure wanderers to their deaths. Ashava and her followers despise these creatures and have a strong rivalry with them. The most famous legend of Ashava is actually about this rivalry. The tale goes that thousands of years ago, in a time long forgotten, a hunter became lost after tracking a deer. In his desperation, he called out to the gods for help, and two creatures responded. The first was Ashava, who took pity on the hunter and manifested as a bright light to guide him home. The second being was Lady Rushlight, a malevolent creature who was rumored to be the first will-o-wisp. Lady Rushlight produced a light of her own, attempting to draw the hunter away from the safe path of Ashava. The hunter, unable to determine which light he should follow, collapsed in defeat, and began to hum a tune to which he and his beloved wife had often danced together. Ashava, hearing this tune, softened her light and began to dance along, bobbing up and down rhythmically and spinning about him like a dance partner. In response, Lady Rushlight sought to overpower Ashava's light by burning ever brighter. The hunter, comforted by Ashava's gentle and familiar movements, made his decision and began to follow the true spark out of the woods. Lady Rushlight, sensing her prey escaping, burned even brighter, becoming harsh and almost blinding. So great was her effort that she eventually burned herself out, expending all of her energy and going dark. Lady Rushlight was never able to create light again, and without a way to lure victims to their doom, soon wasted away. Followers see this tale as a parable, the lesson being that you must be true to yourself and respond to the world around you in a way that is genuine. If you spend your life trying to show people what you think they want to see, you will burn out and lose yourself. Ashava seeks a harmonious, peaceful existence, and therefore rarely comes into conflict with her fellow benevolent gods and demigods. She has especially good relationships with Desna as a goddess of freedom and the night sky, and with Shelyn as a goddess of art and expression. Many Desnans and Shelonites will find common ground with Ashavans, and all three deities are held in high regard by most Varisians. I assume that Ashava is also on good terms with Nocticula, since she is also a goddess of art, expression, and moonlight. The overlap in their areas of interest is simply too great to think that they would find any significant differences on which to disagree. As such, I wouldn't be surprised to find the faith of Ashava alive and well in the eastern regions of New Thassalon, where the Church of Nocticula is especially prominent. Cayden Cailean, of course, gets along well with the beautiful and freedom-loving Ashava, and I would not be surprised at all if he flirted respectfully with her the way he does with Shelyn, though I suspect his efforts would meet about the same rate of success. Caydenites are often the first to join Ashavans when they begin a dance, and the two faiths are on good terms. As a goddess with an interest in laying to rest lost souls, Ashava also gets along well with Pharasma. They have some differences in doctrine, however, as Pharasma sees the undead as abominations to be destroyed, while Ashava sees them as misguided souls to be pitied and helped along their way. Still, the two faiths often work together to guide the unquiet dead to rest, with Ashavans taking the lead with diplomacy and kindness, and Pharasmans following up with force when necessary. As she is a goddess of freedom and expression, Ashava bucks under the authority of more lawful deities like Torag, Erastil, and Abadar. Their regulations typically are too restrictive, leading Ashava to feel unwelcome in their presence. That said, I could see Erastil treating her with a bit more kindness and leniency due to her tendency to lead lost woodsmen and hunters home safely on dark nights. I couldn't find any information on deities which Ashava specifically hates, or who specifically hate her, likely due to her desire for a generally peaceful existence. That said, I think it's probably fair to say that her greatest enemy among the gods is probably Zon-Kuthon. One of Ashava's edicts is to create sources of light in areas of darkness, an act which is specifically anathema to Zon-Kuthon. She is also allied with Shelyn and Desna, two goddesses who Zon-Kuthon specifically hates. I also assume that the gods of undeath, such as Urgathoa, are generally opposed to Ashava's teachings, though they might just as easily consider her beneath their notice. Ashava is associated with the Cosmic Caravan, a broad pantheon of gods associated with celestial bodies. These deities, which include Ashava, the Black Butterfly, Desna, Ketephes, Polura, Sarenrae, Tsukio, and Yog-Sothoth, represent the sun, the stars, the night sky, and the cycle which rotates between them all. The Cosmic Caravan term also refers to a series of constellations which form a zodiac in the sky over Galerion's northern hemisphere. Some astronomers on Galerion refute any connection between the constellations and the similarly named pantheon. Both are especially popular in Varisia, and across Avistan more broadly. Finally, I've also prepared a custom pantheon which I think might be fun to introduce to the setting. Note, this pantheon is of my own creation and is non-canon to the Pathfinder setting. The Nocturnal Sisters is a pantheon consisting of Ashava, in her aspect as a deity of moonlight and the lost, the Black Butterfly, in her capacity as a goddess of stars and silence, and Pulura, in her capacity as a goddess of the northern lights, constellations, and travel. The edicts of the Nocturnal Sisters are to travel at night and aid those who do so, to navigate by the stars, and to embrace the night as a time of contemplation and privacy. Conversely, to needlessly disrupt the peace of the night, to allow others to corrupt or exploit the darkness, or to treat the night with fear are all anathema to the Nocturnal Sisters. Accepted follower alignments are neutral good and chaotic good. The Pantheon's favored weapon is the Dancer's Spear. Its divine skill is health, its divine font is heal, and its divine ability is dexterity or wisdom. The Sisters grant the following spells: 1st rank Warp Step, 3rd rank Dark Vision, and 6th rank Blanket of Stars. This pantheon is commonly worshipped by Varisian caravaneers who travel the far northern reaches of Avistan and regularly experience long stretches of darkness during the winter. For players interested in playing characters who follow Ashava, here are some useful details. For those using the alignment rules, Ashava is chaotic good and will accept clerics of neutral good alignment. Her edicts are to dance even when there is no music, to cast light in places of darkness, and to lead the lost. Conversely, to intentionally mislead someone, to desecrate graves, or to abandon a creature in darkness are all anathema to Ashava. Her holy symbol is the silhouette of a dancing woman against the backdrop of a full moon. Her domains are darkness, moon, repose, and soul. Ashava's sacred colors are midnight blue and silver. Devout followers will likely wear non-restrictive clothing to better allow them to dance and move freely. These might range from skirts and dresses to scarves, shawls, and robes. Followers will also likely tend to wear multiple layers, which can be easily added or removed as the weather and their activity level demands. Like Ashava herself, followers, and especially priests, might seek to make their clothing glimmer like starlight. This is often accomplished by sewing gemstones, be they real or fake, into their clothing in ways intended to catch the light. Due to her prominence among ethnic Varisians, Varisian clothing styles will be common among her faithful. These might include rich, complex embroideries abounding with color. Also, Varisians often associate the color teal with dancers, as it is said to improve strength and nonverbal communication skills. As such, teal might be common among followers of Ashava. Ashava's sacred weapon is the Bladed Scarf, a weapon which is easily carried during travel, easily concealed from authorities, and which is intended to be wielded in a dance-like fighting style. The bladed scarf is also common among Varisians, and holds significant cultural importance. Their own style of scarf, the capenya, is a specially made item of clothing, which is woven with a series of patterns and colors which tell the history of the wearer's family. Followers of Ashava might also wield other weapons which can be wielded in a dance-like fighting style. These might include the fighting fan, the dancer's spear, the scimitar, the urumi, or the whip. Ashava's sacred animal is the wolf, which she favors for its tendency to wander the wilds at night. Other nocturnal animals, like owls, various rodents, or cats, might be found among her followers as well. Ashava's formal clergy consists almost entirely of clerics and bards. All followers are trained in the perform skill, so charismatic characters who could take advantage of this, like oracles, sorcerers, and especially battle dancer swashbucklers, might easily take to the faith. Other marshals who feel comfortable with darkness, or who rely on careful movements, like the rogue, might also find some prevalence in her faith. I could also see a liberator champion fitting in nicely. Archetypes like the acrobat might be easy to reflavor as a dancer, as might the staff acrobat. Honestly, I think it would be really funny to build a character with feats from the wrestler archetype reflavored as dance moves. The folklorist might be another archetype, which could be fun to reflavor, to be themed around dancing. Other archetypes focused on laying the undead to rest might be common among her followers as well, such as the Exorcist. I'd also like to make specific mention of the Spelldancer archetype, as laid out in Impossible Lands Plus on Pathfinder Infinite. It is particularly flavorful for a follower of Ashava, and looks pretty fun on top of that. As I've mentioned before, Ashava's faith is most common among humans of Varisian ethnicity. That said, Varisians are extremely well-traveled, so they might easily pass their faith to any number of other ancestries and heritages across Avistan. I could easily see Duskwalkers or some Dhampirs coming to her faith for her teachings on laying the dead to rest. Additionally, Nephilim who descend from the Azadas of Elysium might be drawn to her emphasis on dance and creative expression. Ashava also has a significant following among non-evil lycanthropes, so members of the Beastkin ancestry, or characters using the lycanthrope archetype from Howl of the Wild, might easily be found among her followers. Devout followers of Ashava are true to themselves, and are eager to help those who have lost their way, be it physically, spiritually, or emotionally. They generally desire a peaceful existence, but readily venture into the wild. They seek to lay the dead to rest with kindness and understanding, only resorting to violence as a last resort. Their greatest joy is in dance, and they can find this joy on their own or in the company of others. For further character inspiration, check out the Ashavic Dancer Prestige class from 1st edition. It is functionally a class archetype for the bard, allowing it to interact with undead in new ways to better lay them to rest. Also in 1st edition, the Capena Dancer Magus archetype was particularly flavorful and powerful. On her 1E Archives of Nethys page, her deific obedience might serve as a good inspiration for in-character mannerisms and daily rituals, while the Moonrise Arrow spell could be fun to port over to 2E. For GMs looking to incorporate Ashava and her followers into a campaign, here are some ideas. As an Empyreal Lord, Ashava has no herald, and no divine servitors. That said, she likely has the loyalty of a few Azadas or angels in her home plane, whom she might be able to send out as messengers when she is otherwise occupied. These servants might take the form of wolves made of moonlight, or as floating balls of light, similar to will-o-wisps. Ashava is likely to show her favor to followers by blessing them with unexpected gracefulness on the dance floor, or by blessing them with a sense of where they need to go if they become lost. Her disfavor might be shown by a sudden sense of clumsiness. I should note that I am assuming and inferring these servants and signs of favor or disfavor. They are not technically canon. Nothing has been printed on this topic, so these are my best guesses. Ashava is one of the goddesses who is most likely involved in the resistance movements currently underway in Nidal. As a tyrannical deity who considers darkness to be a place of pain and fear, Zon-Kuthon has made no small amount of enemies. The Black Triune and their agents, the Umbral Court, are currently engaged in an extermination campaign against various followers of Desna, including the Dreamers in the Ateran Plains and the more widely spread out Whispered Song. Other deities opposed to Zon-Kuthon include Shelyn and the Black Butterfly. Followers of Ashava might want to join forces with these other goddesses in trying to free Nidal from Zon-Kuthon's grasp and restore a sense of security to the night. Followers of Ashava are commonly dancers, and often dancers by trade. It might be fun to base a campaign around a troupe of dancers, singers, and other musicians who travel the land to earn a living. This might serve as a fun campaign for players new to Golarion, allowing them to get a glimpse of a wide variety of the different settings Golarion has to offer. Members of the troupe might include Ashavans, Desnans, Cadenites, Nocticulans, and Shelonites, and the campaign might take players from Magnamar, over the Mindspin Mountains into Nirmathas and Multhun, or even the Hobgoblin Nation of Oprak. From there, players could continue on to wealth-oriented Druma under the rule of the Prophecies of Calistrade. From there, it's just a short jaunt to Kyonin or even Highhelm. A particularly ambitious GM might even implement a subplot and mechanical subsystem involving the composition and performance of new songs and dances particular to each region, allowing the troupe to earn increasing renown as they go. Finally, followers of Ashava might be interesting to integrate into campaigns involving the undead. Their tendency to approach these situations with diplomacy rather than violence has the potential for a compelling story, especially if set in a region where undead are treated with nothing but hostility. I could see an interesting adventure in the Gravelands among the Knights of Lastwall, where an Ashavan, or party of Ashavans, must convince the more militaristic members of the Knights to allow them a chance at laying the dead to rest in a peaceful manner. Followers of deities like Regathiel or Vildeus, or knights who have sworn the Crimson Oath, will likely meet this idea with open hostility. By contrast, followers of Iomide might hearken back to her famous 8th Act, in which she convinced a Grave Knight to fall upon his sword and seek redemption for his crimes in the afterlife. Other followers of merciful gods, like Sarenrae or Shelyn, might support the Ashavans, allowing them a chance to lay an undead servant of Tar-Baphon to rest. Personally, I think this would be a great way to tie to the themes of violence, revenge, and forgiveness which are present in the Gravelands. Tar-Baphon commonly employs fear and direct control to bind servants to his will, so I love the idea of a party of PCs using kindness and understanding to undo some of his evil. So that's it. That's Ashava, the true spark. For being a demigod, she is fantastically rich as a character and as a piece of the setting. She introduces some much-needed nuance to the treatment of the undead in Pathfinder, which I love, and players can have a lot of fun with her emphasis on dance and performance. Next time, I am continuing my exploration of the minor deities of the Pathfinder setting. Up next is Razmir, the living god of the nation of Razmiran, and the secret 5th mortal to have passed the test of the Starstone. No spoilers in the comments, please. See you next time.